In 1945, the war was over, but the world was not at peace. Europe had been devastated. Millions of people had been displaced. Entire economies were rebuilding, and a new geopolitical rivalry was already emerging. The United States now faced a completely different challenge. How do you prevent another global conflict without returning to the isolation that had existed before the war? The answer would reshape American power. Instead of standing alone, America began building alliances. Instead of relying only on its own military, it connected its security with the security of other nations. This was a profound shift. Military power was becoming networked. Europe was no longer simply a collection of independent countries. It was becoming part of a larger security architecture. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization would become one of the most important foundations of that system. But the larger transformation went beyond NATO. Military cooperation created intelligence networks. Defense agreements created shared infrastructure. Joint exercises created interoperability. Industrial partnerships connected defense economies, and strategic bases extended American reach across continents. One country was no longer operating alone. It was building a network. That network would eventually become one of the most important sources of American global power, because the nature of power was changing. The strongest nation was no longer necessarily the nation capable of fighting every war alone. It could be the nation capable of building a system in which many nations shared the same security architecture. An alliance begins with a promise, but a promise alone cannot protect a continent. For an alliance to become powerful, it needs infrastructure, shared bases, shared communications, shared intelligence, shared logistics, and most importantly, shared capabilities. This is where NATO became more than a treaty. Member nations began building the ability to operate together. Aircraft needed compatible systems. Navies needed coordinated communications. Soldiers needed common procedures. Intelligence agencies needed mechanisms for sharing information. Military planning became increasingly interconnected. The result was a network, and networks have a unique characteristic. Their strength does not come from one connection. It comes from thousands of connections working together. A military capability in one country could now support a broader strategic architecture. A naval base could protect a shipping route. An airfield could extend defensive reach. A communication network could connect commanders across borders. An intelligence system could provide information to multiple governments. Each individual component had value, but together they created something much larger, a collective security system. This changed the economics of defense as well. Nations no longer needed to build every capability independently. They could specialize, coordinate, share infrastructure, and operate as part of a larger network. That created economies of scale. It also created something even more important, interdependence. The security of one member became connected to the security of others, and once that connection became deeply embedded, the alliance stopped being a political agreement. It became part of the infrastructure of the international system. Because the most powerful alliances are not held together by documents, they are held together by systems that make cooperation possible every day. The real strength of an alliance is not measured by the number of countries inside it. It is measured by what happens when one of them is threatened. Collective defense changed the calculation of power. An attack against one member could no longer be viewed as an isolated event. It could trigger a response from an entire network. That principle created something larger than military cooperation. It created deterrence. An adversary was no longer calculating the strength of one country. It had to calculate the combined capabilities of many. Military forces, industrial capacity, intelligence, logistics, technology, and economic resources. The calculation became increasingly complex. This is the hidden power of networks. A network can make individual nodes more powerful simply by connecting them. A country with limited capabilities can gain strategic strength when those capabilities are integrated with a much larger system. The same principle exists everywhere in modern civilization.
A bank becomes more useful when connected to a payment network. A factory becomes more productive when connected to a supply chain. A data center becomes more valuable when connected to the internet. And a military becomes more powerful when connected to an alliance. The architecture creates leverage. This was one of the defining innovations of the post-war security system. Power was no longer concentrated entirely inside national borders. It was distributed across relationships. That made the system harder to attack and harder to dismantle. Because when power becomes networked, challenging one part of the system can mean confronting the entire architecture.
An alliance may look like a military organization from the outside, but beneath the uniforms, there is another system: intelligence, communications, logistics, technology, industry, finance. These systems determine whether military power can actually function. A modern military cannot operate without information. It cannot move without logistics. It cannot sustain operations without industry. And it cannot coordinate across continents without communication. This means the true architecture of an alliance extends far beyond its soldiers. Satellites monitor enormous distances. Secure networks move information between command centers. Transport systems move equipment across borders. Defense companies develop increasingly advanced technologies. Factories maintain the industrial capacity required to sustain those capabilities. Each layer supports the next, and together they create strategic depth. This is where alliances become especially powerful. One country may possess advanced technology. Another may provide strategic geography. Another may contribute intelligence. Another may provide industrial capacity. Another may provide logistics. The network combines them. The result is greater than the sum of its individual parts. This is not simply cooperation. It is specialization at geopolitical scale. And specialization creates efficiency. The same principle that transformed global business also transformed global security. Countries began operating as nodes inside a much larger system. The architecture became increasingly difficult to separate. Military power became connected to technology. Technology became connected to industry. Industry became connected to finance. Finance became connected to trade. And trade became connected to political stability. What appeared to be a military alliance was actually becoming something much larger, a complete ecosystem of power. Because modern power is rarely stored in one place, it is distributed across the systems that allow power to move. An alliance needs more than agreements. It needs position. Geography has always been part of power. A country can possess advanced weapons, but distance can still limit what those weapons can accomplish. The post-war alliance system changed that equation. American forces established and maintained strategic positions across Allied regions. Air bases, naval facilities, communication centers, logistics hubs. These positions created something difficult to measure on a map: reach. A crisis thousands of kilometers away could now become strategically relevant much faster. Aircraft could operate from forward positions. Naval forces could move through established routes. Supplies could travel through existing infrastructure. Information could move across secure communication networks. Geography itself became part of the architecture. But the bases were not simply symbols of military presence. They were nodes inside a larger system. Each location connected to other locations. Each route supported another route. Each installation increased the effectiveness of the network around it. This is how physical infrastructure creates strategic leverage. A single base may appear limited. A network of bases can transform the geography of an entire region. And once that infrastructure has existed for decades,
it becomes extremely difficult to replicate. The value is no longer simply in the buildings, it is in the relationships surrounding them, the logistics, the agreements, the personnel, the communications, the operational knowledge, the accumulated trust. That is why strategic infrastructure can become one of the most durable forms of power, because whoever controls the network does not simply control territory, they control the ability to move through it.
A military alliance cannot survive on weapons alone. Every weapon begins somewhere else, inside a factory, inside a research laboratory, inside a supply chain, inside an industrial system. This is the layer most people never see. Defense power depends on manufacturing capacity. Manufacturing depends on energy. Energy depends on infrastructure. Infrastructure depends on capital. And advanced weapons increasingly depend on technology, semiconductors, sensors, satellites, software, communications, material science. The modern battlefield is built long before a conflict begins. That changed the meaning of military power. A country could possess a powerful military today, but without industrial capacity, maintaining that power tomorrow becomes far more difficult.
The alliance system created another advantage. Industrial capabilities could be distributed across multiple economies. One nation could specialize in aerospace, another in naval systems, another in electronics, another in logistics. The network connected them. This created redundancy. It also created scale. Research could be shared, production could be coordinated, technology could move between institutions, and industrial capacity could support a much larger strategic system. The result was an architecture that extended far beyond the battlefield. It connected factories to governments, governments to alliances, alliances to global supply chains, and supply chains to the broader economy. This is why modern power cannot be measured by weapons alone. Weapons are the visible layer. Industrial capacity is the invisible foundation beneath them, because the ability to build power is often more important than the ability to display it.
Military power can move across oceans, but information moves even faster. This created another layer of the alliance architecture: intelligence. Modern security depends on knowing what is happening before it becomes a crisis. Where are military forces moving? What technologies are being developed? What threats are emerging? What is changing inside another country? The answers required information, and information requires infrastructure. Satellites observe enormous areas of the planet. Radar systems monitor airspace. Signals intelligence captures patterns of communication. Analysts transform millions of fragments into strategic assessments. Secure networks move that information between governments and military commands. Each system sees only part of the picture. Together, they can reveal the larger pattern. This is another advantage of networks. Information becomes more valuable when different sources can be combined. One sensor detects movement, another identifies a pattern, another provides context. The network connects them, and suddenly, information becomes intelligence. Intelligence then influences decisions. Decisions determine military positioning. Positioning changes deterrence. Deterrence influences the behavior of states. A chain reaction begins. None of this is visible to the average person. There are no headlines announcing every connection. The system works quietly, but that quietness is part of its power, because the strongest intelligence architecture is not designed to attract attention. It is designed to detect changes before everyone else sees them.
And in a world where decisions can determine the balance between conflict and stability, information is not simply knowledge, it is strategic infrastructure.
The alliance was never only about soldiers. Over time, it became connected to the economy. Defense contracts created industrial relationships. Military standards influenced technology. Research programs accelerated innovation. Infrastructure supported logistics, and trade connected the economies of allied nations. The security system was becoming an economic system. This created another form of power, dependence. When industries across different countries become connected, their interests begin to overlap. A defense company in one country may depend on components from another. A technology company may depend on global supply chains. A military system may depend on software developed thousands of kilometers away. The network becomes increasingly difficult to separate. This is not necessarily weakness. In many cases, it is the source of resilience. If one component fails, another can compensate. If one supplier disappears, the network can search for alternatives. If one country lacks a capability, another can provide it.
Interdependence creates redundancy, and redundancy creates resilience, but it also changes the nature of power. Influence no longer comes only from controlling territory. It can come from controlling critical connections, the technologies, the standards, the supply chains, the financial relationships, the infrastructure. These invisible connections determine how quickly a system can respond when pressure arrives. That is why the alliance architecture became so durable. It was no longer supported by military treaties alone. It was embedded inside industries, institutions, technologies, and economies. The deeper the connections became, the harder the system was to separate. And that is when an alliance stops being merely an agreement between governments. It becomes an architecture that shapes the behavior of the entire network. After decades of development, the alliance had become something far larger than the treaty that created it. It had become a network of networks. Military systems connected to intelligence. Intelligence connected to technology. Technology connected to industry. Industry connected to finance. Finance connected to trade. And trade connected everything back to the stability of the global economy. No single component created the system. The power came from the connections between them. That is what makes networked power so difficult to understand. There is no single building where it exists. No single office controls every connection. No single weapon represents its full strength. The architecture is distributed. A military base supports a logistics network. A satellite supports an intelligence network. A semiconductor factory supports a technology network. A financial market supports an industrial network. Each system strengthens another, and together, they create strategic depth. This changed the meaning of American influence. America no longer needed to project power entirely by itself. Its alliances extended its reach. Its infrastructure multiplied its capabilities. Its partners contributed geography, technology, intelligence, industry, and military capacity. Power had become collaborative, but that did not make it weaker. It made it scalable. The same principle explains why networks dominate modern civilization. A single computer is useful. The internet is transformative. A single bank has limits. A global payment network can move capital across continents. A single military can defend a territory. An alliance can reshape the strategic balance of an entire region. This is the architecture of leverage. Connect enough systems together, and the network itself becomes a source of power. Because in the modern world,
Power is increasingly determined not by what you control alone, but by how many critical systems you can connect.
The story of American power is often told through presidents, wars, weapons, and moments of geopolitical confrontation. But beneath all of them, there is another story, the story of architecture. After World War II, America did not simply build military strength, it built connections, alliances, bases, intelligence networks, industrial partnerships, financial relationships, technology systems, and trade networks. Each became another layer of a much larger structure. Over decades, those layers became increasingly interconnected. The result was not simply American military power, it was a global network capable of extending influence across continents. That is the deeper lesson of the alliance system. Power does not always need to be concentrated. It can be distributed across relationships. A country can become stronger by making its partners stronger. A military becomes more capable when intelligence is shared. An industry becomes more resilient when supply chains are diversified. A technology ecosystem becomes more powerful when standards are adopted across borders. And an alliance becomes more durable when its members benefit from the system every day. This is how influence becomes architecture. It stops depending on one decision, one leader, or one generation. The system itself begins carrying the power forward. That is why the greatest structures of modern civilization are often invisible. They exist inside agreements, networks, infrastructure, standards, institutions, and relationships. You may never see the architecture, but you live inside its consequences every day. Because the most powerful systems are rarely the ones that demand your attention. They are the ones that quietly shape the choices available to everyone. This is LEXERA, decoding order, architecting power.